On Christmas, my son said, "You already raised me. Now step aside, you old hag." I just nodded. Later, I made a call that turned his worst nightmares into reality. Then I told him, "Remember that next time." But let me start from the beginning, because what happened that Christmas night was 35 years in the making. The dining room sparkled with holiday decorations I had spent weeks preparing. Crystal glasses caught the candlelight, casting tiny rainbows across the mahogany table that had belonged to my grandmother. The turkey was perfectly golden, the stuffing seasoned just the way Robert liked it since he was little. Everything had to be perfect for Christmas dinner. It always did. I smoothed my navy dress one more time and checked my reflection in the hallway mirror. At 65, I still took pride in my appearance. My silver hair was styled in soft waves, my makeup subtle but polished. I wanted to look like the matriarch I had always been in this family. "Mom, where's the wine opener?"
Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching.
Robert's voice carried from the kitchen, already tinged with that impatient edge I had grown to recognize over the years. "Second drawer on the left, sweetheart," I called back. The same place it had been for 20 years. I heard Melissa, my daughter-in-law, whisper something to him that I couldn't quite catch, followed by his low chuckle. They often had these little private conversations, excluding me even when I was in the same room. I had learned to pretend I didn't notice. The grandchildren, Emma and Jake, were sprawled on the living room carpet, surrounded by wrapping paper and new toys. At 8 and 10, they were still young enough to find magic in Christmas morning, though old enough to be absorbed in their tablets rather than talking to Grandma. "Dinner's ready," I announced, my voice carrying the warmth I always tried to project during family gatherings. Everyone filed into the dining room with the enthusiasm of people fulfilling an obligation rather than celebrating a holiday. Robert, now 38 and successful in his pharmaceutical sales career, loosened his tie as he settled into his chair. Melissa, perfectly put together in her designer sweater, immediately began cutting Jake's turkey before he even asked for help. I had prepared Robert's favorite meal, just like every Christmas for the past 35 years. The same green bean casserole his grandmother used to make, though he had no idea she wasn't actually his biological grandmother. The same sweet potato soufflé that took me 3 hours to prepare. The same traditions I had built around him, creating the stable childhood I desperately wanted him to have. "This looks wonderful, Eleanor," Melissa said, though she was already reaching for her phone. "The kids are so excited about their presents." "I'm glad," I replied, serving generous portions onto everyone's plates. "I remember when Robert was their age, he would barely sleep Christmas Eve." Robert barely looked up from his phone. "That was a long time ago, Mom." The dismissal in his voice was casual, almost absent-minded, but it stung. I had spent the morning preparing this feast, the afternoon setting the perfect table, all for these few hours together as a family. But somewhere along the way, these gatherings had become performances where I played the aging mother grateful for any attention thrown her way. "Did you hear that the Hendersons are taking a cruise to the Caribbean next month?" I tried, attempting to spark conversation. "They invited me to join them." "That's nice," Melissa replied without looking up from her phone. Robert was scrolling through emails, his jaw working as he chewed. The silence stretched uncomfortably, filled only by the sounds of silverware against china and the distant noise of the children's tablets. I tried again. "I was thinking of redecorating the guest room, maybe something brighter for when you all visit." "Mom?" Robert set down his fork and finally looked at me directly. His eyes held that familiar mixture of impatience and barely concealed irritation. "We need to talk about something." My heart skipped. In my experience, family conversations that started this way never ended well. Melissa glanced up from her phone, and I caught something pass between them, one of those silent communications that married couples develop, full of meaning I wasn't privy to. "What is it?" I asked, though part of me already dreaded the answer. Robert cleared his throat, the sound sharp in the suddenly tense room. "Melissa and I have been talking, and we think it's time you considered simplifying your life." Simplifying. Such a pleasant word for something that felt like a trap closing around me. "What do you mean?" I kept my voice steady, though my hands trembled slightly as I reached for my water glass. "This house is too big for one person," Melissa jumped in, her voice taking on that patronizing tone she used when she thought she was being helpful. All these stairs, the maintenance, the yard work. It's a lot for someone your age. Someone my age. As if 65 meant I was already 1 foot in the grave. I managed just fine, I said quietly. Robert leaned forward, and for a moment, I saw a flash of the little boy who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms. But it disappeared as quickly as it came. Mom, you're not getting any younger. What happens if you fall down those stairs? What if something happens and no one's around to help? The concern in his voice might have been touching if I hadn't heard this exact conversation from friends whose children had used identical words before moving them into assisted living facilities. There are some lovely senior communities nearby, Melissa added, pulling out her phone again. I've been researching them. Places where you could have your own apartment but with support when you need it. My throat constricted. They had been researching. Behind my back, planning my future without consulting me. I don't need support, I managed. Robert's expression hardened. Mom, this isn't really a discussion. We're trying to look out for you here, not a discussion. The words hung in the air like a slap. I was being informed, not consulted, about my own life. I'm perfectly capable of making my own decisions, I said, my voice rising slightly despite my efforts to stay calm. That's when Robert said it. The words that would echo in my mind for weeks to come. The words that changed everything between us forever. He leaned back in his chair, looked me straight in the eye, and said with the casual cruelty that only family can master, "You already raised me. Now step aside, you old hag." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the children looked up from their tablets, sensing the shift in the room's atmosphere. Melissa's eyes widened slightly, though whether from shock or satisfaction I couldn't tell. I felt something inside me break, not just my heart, though that was certainly shattered. Something deeper. The last thread of hope I had been clinging to, that my son still loved me, still saw me as his mother rather than an inconvenience to be managed. I just nodded. What else was there to do? Scream? Cry? Throw my carefully prepared dinner across the room? That would only confirm what he already seemed to believe, that I was an hysterical old woman who couldn't handle reality. So I nodded, as if his words were perfectly reasonable, as if being called an old hag by the child I had sacrificed everything for was just another part of growing older. I understand, I said quietly, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. Robert seemed surprised by my calm response. He had probably expected tears, arguments, emotional manipulation. Instead, I began clearing the dishes as if nothing had happened. "Mom," he started, but I cut him off. "It's fine, Robert. You've made your position very clear." I carried the plates to the kitchen, my movements automatic. Behind me, I heard hushed conversations, Melissa's voice sharp with whispered urgency. But I focused on the simple task of scraping uneaten food into the garbage disposal, watching my hours of preparation disappear down the drain. When I returned to the dining room, they were gathering their things. Christmas dinner was over, apparently. The children were already putting on their coats, eager to leave and play with their new toys at home. "We should go," Melissa announced, not meeting my eyes. "Early day tomorrow, December 26th. What early day could there possibly be on December 26th? Robert kissed my cheek, a perfunctory gesture that felt more like a dismissal than affection. "We'll talk more about this later, Mom. But start thinking about what I said." And then they were gone, leaving me alone in my perfectly decorated dining room with the remnants of a Christmas dinner that had turned into something else entirely. I sat in the silence for a long time, staring at the empty chairs, the abandoned napkins, the half-eaten meal that represented so much more than food. Then I walked to my bedroom, opened the bottom drawer of my dresser, and pulled out a manila folder I hadn't touched in over 30 years. Inside the manila folder were documents that could change everything. Papers that held the power to shatter Robert's world just as completely as he had shattered mine with a few careless words. I spread the adoption papers across my bedspread, my hands trembling as I touched documents I hadn't looked at in decades. The official seal of the state, the signatures, the dates, all of it as crisp and damning as the day I had signed them 35 years ago. Robert Michael Lawson. That had been his name before I changed it to Robert Michael Harrison, before I gave him my late husband's surname and erased every trace of who he had been before I found him. The memories came flooding back, despite my efforts over the years to bury them. I was 30 years old then, recently widowed after my husband James died in a car accident. We had been trying to have children for years, going through test after test, procedure after procedure. The doctors said it was unexplained infertility. Sometimes these things just happened, they told us with their sympathetic smiles and useless platitudes. James's death had left me hollow, but it had also left me with something else, a desperate need to fill the emptiness in my heart and my home. I had always wanted to be a mother. It felt like the one thing I was meant to do with my life. The social worker at the county adoption agency was a kind woman named Patricia Santos. She had gentle eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a way of speaking that made you feel like she genuinely cared about the children in her charge. "We have a little boy," she had told me during one of our meetings in her cramped office. "He's 3 years old. He's been in the system for about 6 months now." She pulled out a thin file and opened it carefully, as if the contents were fragile. "His name is Robert. His parents," she paused, choosing her words carefully. "His parents have some significant challenges." That was how social workers talked about drug addicts, I learned. They had challenges and issues and difficulties maintaining stability. They never said the words that would make it real. Neglect, abuse, abandonment. "What kind of challenges?" I had asked. Patricia glanced at the file again. "His mother, Linda Lawson, is 19. She's been struggling with substance abuse since she was 15. Heroin, primarily. The father, Tommy Morrison, is 22. He has a criminal record, breaking and entering, possession with intent to distribute, assault." My heart sank. This poor child. Robert was found alone in their apartment when the landlord came to evict them. He had been by himself for 3 days. There was no food in the house, no clean clothes. He was severely malnourished and dehydrated. 3 days. A 3-year-old boy, alone and hungry, waiting for parents who weren't coming back. "Where are his parents now?" I asked. "Linda is in a rehabilitation facility, court-ordered. Tommy is in county jail awaiting trial. They've both relinquished their parental rights." I thought about that little boy, alone and scared, probably wondering why his mommy and daddy had left him. My chest ached with a pain that was both foreign and familiar. "Can I meet him?" Patricia smiled for the first time since we'd started talking. "I was hoping you'd ask." The children's home was a sprawling brick building that tried to look cheerful with its bright yellow trim and playground equipment, but couldn't quite hide the institutional sadness that seemed to seep from its walls. Patricia led me through a series of hallways lined with children's artwork and motivational posters about dreams and believing in yourself. We found Robert in the playroom, sitting alone in a corner with a worn teddy bear clutched against his chest. He was smaller than I had expected, with dark hair that stuck up in every direction and enormous brown eyes that seemed too old for his face. "Robert," Patricia said gently, kneeling down to his level. "This is Mrs. Harrison. She'd like to meet you." He looked up at me with those ancient eyes, taking in my nervous smile and the small toy truck I had brought as a peace offering. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he stood up, still clutching his teddy bear, and walked over to me. "Are you my new mommy?" he asked in a voice so small and hopeful that it nearly broke my heart on the spot. I knelt down so we were eye to eye. "Would you like me to be?" He nodded solemnly, then held out his teddy bear. "This is Mr. Brown. He doesn't have a mommy either." That was it. In that moment, looking into the eyes of this brave little boy who had already survived more trauma than most adults, I knew I would do whatever it took to give him the life he deserved. I would be his mother, his protector, his safe harbor. I would make sure he never felt abandoned again. The adoption process took 8 months. 8 months of home visits, background checks, psychological evaluations, and court hearings. 8 months of Robert living in foster care while bureaucrats decided whether I was fit to be his mother. I visited him twice a week during that time, bringing books and toys and gradually building the trust that trauma had stolen from him. He had nightmares, Patricia warned me. He hoarded food under his bed. He flinched when people moved too quickly or spoke too loudly. But slowly, gradually, he began to heal. And so did I. The day the adoption was finalized was the happiest day of my life. Robert Michael Lawson became Robert Michael Harrison, and I became his mother in the eyes of the law and in the depths of my heart. I never told him he was adopted. I know that sounds terrible by today's standards, but things were different then. The social worker and the judge both agreed that it might be better for Robert to have a fresh start, to believe that he had always been loved and wanted. I created a whole history for us. I told him stories about how excited Daddy and I had been when we found out we were having a baby, how we had painted his nursery blue and bought a crib, and dreamed about the day he would come home with us. I showed him pictures of James holding him as a newborn, pictures that didn't exist, but that I described so vividly that Robert swore he could remember them. I buried every trace of his life before me. I destroyed the social worker's reports, the medical records documenting his malnutrition and neglect, the police reports from the day he was found. I kept only the official adoption papers, locked away where Robert would never find them, and for 35 years, it worked. Robert grew up believing he was my biological son, the child James and I had always wanted. He never questioned why he didn't look exactly like me, why we had no extended family, why there were no baby pictures from his first 3 years of life. He became everything I had dreamed he could be: smart, successful, confident. He graduated valedictorian from high school, earned a full scholarship to college, built a career that James would have been proud of. He married a beautiful woman, gave me grandchildren who called me grandma with genuine affection. I thought I had saved him. I thought I had given him the perfect life, the life every child deserves. But now, sitting in my bedroom with those adoption papers spread across my quilt, I realized something had gone wrong somewhere along the way. The grateful little boy who had clutched his teddy bear and asked if I would be his new mommy had grown into a man who could look me in the eye and call me an old hag. Had I protected him too much? Loved him too much? Given him everything so easily that he forgot what it felt like to need someone? Or was this who he had always been destined to become? Was there something in his biological makeup, some genetic predisposition toward cruelty and selfishness, that no amount of love could overcome? I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. Marcus Kellerman, the private investigator I had used 5 years ago when I suspected my neighbor of stealing my newspaper. He was discreet, professional, and thorough. The phone rang twice before his familiar gravelly voice answered. Kellerman Investigations. Marcus, it's Eleanor Harrison. Eleanor, good to hear from you. How's retirement treating you? It's fine, Marcus, but I need your help with something that requires absolute discretion. There was a pause. Marcus had been in this business long enough to recognize the tone of a client who was about to ask for something complicated. What can I do for you? I took a deep breath, looking down at the adoption papers in my lap. I need you to find some people for me. People from a long time ago. How long ago are we talking? 35 years. Another pause. Longer this time. Eleanor, that's a long time. Records get lost. People move. People die. What exactly are you looking for? I thought about Robert's words, about the casual cruelty in his voice, about the way he had dismissed 35 years of love and sacrifice with a single phrase. I'm looking for my son's biological parents, and any siblings he might have. The silence stretched between us for nearly 30 seconds. Eleanor, Marcus said finally, his voice careful and measured. Are you sure about this? Sometimes the past is better left buried. I've been protecting him from the truth his entire life, I said quietly. Maybe it's time he learned what he came from. Maybe it's time he understood exactly what I saved him from. This could get messy. Good, I said, surprising myself with the venom in my voice. It's about time things got messy. After I hung up, I sat in the growing darkness of my bedroom, surrounded by the evidence of the secret I had kept for 35 years. Outside, I could hear the sound of children playing in the distance, their laughter carrying on the cold December air. Somewhere out there were Robert's biological parents, his real family, the people who had given him life and then abandoned him to starve alone in a filthy apartment. Robert wanted me to step aside, to disappear quietly into some senior community where I wouldn't be a burden on his perfect life. He thought he was better than me, that he had outgrown his need for the woman who had raised him. He had no idea that everything he thought he knew about himself was a lie. 3 days after Christmas, Robert showed up at my door with a stack of brochures and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I brought some information for you to look at," he said, stepping into my foyer without waiting for an invitation. "About those senior communities we discussed." Discussed. As if our Christmas dinner had been a civilized conversation rather than a humiliation. Melissa appeared behind him, carrying a folder and wearing the kind of professional smile she probably used with difficult clients at her real estate job. "We've done some research, Eleanor. These places are really quite nice." I led them into the living room, the same room where Robert had played with toy cars as a child, where I had read him bedtime stories and kissed scraped knees. Now he sat on my sofa like a stranger conducting business. "This one is particularly lovely," Melissa said, spreading glossy brochures across my coffee table. "Sunset Manor. It has a beautiful dining room, activities coordinator, and skilled nursing care if you need it down the road." I picked up one of the brochures. Smiling elderly people played shuffleboard and worked on jigsaw puzzles. "Assisted living at its finest," the headline proclaimed. The starting price was listed in small print at the bottom, $40,200 per month. "It's expensive," I said. Robert leaned forward, his expression serious. "Don't worry about the cost, Mom. We'll figure out the finances." By selling my house, I realized. By liquidating everything I had worked my entire life to build. "There's also Meadowbrook Gardens," Melissa continued, pulling out another brochure. "It's a bit more affordable, and they have a memory care unit, which might be helpful as you get older." Memory care. The implication hung in the air between us. They weren't just planning for my current needs. They were planning for my decline, my eventual deterioration into someone who wouldn't be able to object to their decisions. "I don't have memory problems," I said quietly. "Of course not," Robert said quickly. "But it's good to plan ahead, to be in a place where you can age in place, where there's support available when you need it. When, not if." In his mind, my independence was already over. "I've also brought some paperwork," Melissa said, pulling documents from her folder. "Power of attorney forms, healthcare directives. We thought it would be good to get these things sorted out now while you're still—" She paused, searching for the right word. "Competent," I suggested. She flushed slightly. I was going to say healthy. I looked at the papers she was spreading across my table. Legal documents that would give Robert control over my medical decisions, my finances, my entire life. They had come prepared, organized, ready to strip away my autonomy with the efficiency of a hostile takeover. "This seems premature," I said. "I'm perfectly healthy." "Mom, we're not saying you're not," Robert said, his voice taking on that patronizing tone I had grown to hate. "But these things take time to arrange. It's better to do it now, when there's no pressure, no crisis, no ability to object," he meant. Once I was in crisis, once I was vulnerable and scared, I might not be thinking clearly enough to sign away my rights. "I need time to think about all this," I said, gathering the brochures into a neat stack. Melissa's smile tightened. "Of course. But don't take too long. Some of these places have waiting lists." After they left, I sat alone in my living room, surrounded by their carefully researched plans for my future. They had thought of everything: the facility, the financing, the legal framework to ensure I couldn't change my mind later. What they hadn't considered was that I might fight back. My phone rang later that evening. "Marcus, I've got some preliminary information for you," he said without preamble. "Are you somewhere you can talk freely?" I glanced around my empty house. "Yes, Linda Lawson, Robert's biological mother. She's still alive, living in a trailer park about 40 miles from you, actually. She's been clean for about 6 years now, working at a truck stop diner. Has 3 other kids, all younger than Robert, all from different fathers." My heart pounded. Robert had siblings, half-siblings who had grown up in the chaos he had been spared. What about the father, Tommy Morrison? That's where it gets interesting. Tommy died 8 years ago. Overdose. But he left behind quite a legacy. 2 sons with Linda, Robert's half-brothers. One's in prison for armed robbery. The other's been in and out of jail for drug possession and theft. There's also a daughter, different mother. She's clean, works as a cashier at a grocery store, but she's got 3 kids by 3 different men and lives on welfare. I closed my eyes, absorbing the information. This was Robert's real family. These were the people he would have grown up with if I hadn't intervened. "There's more," Marcus continued. I found some old police reports. Linda's been arrested multiple times over the years. Prostitution, drug possession, check fraud. The family has quite a history with social services, multiple children removed from various homes. And Robert never knew any of this? Not unless you told him. The adoption was sealed, remember? All the original records were supposed to be destroyed or locked away permanently. I thought about Robert sitting on my sofa 3 hours ago, confidently planning my future while completely unaware of his own past. Marcus, I want you to find them. Linda, the half-siblings, anyone else who's still alive. I want to know everything about them, where they live, what they do, what kind of people they are. Eleanor, what exactly are you planning? I looked at the senior living brochures still scattered across my coffee table, at the power of attorney forms Melissa had left behind. I'm planning to give my son exactly what he asked for, I said, the truth about his family. The next morning, Robert called. Did you look over those brochures? He asked without any greeting. I'm still considering my options. Mom, you can't put this off forever. Melissa found out that Sunset Manor only has one apartment available, and it won't last long. The pressure was increasing. They wanted me to make a decision quickly, before I had time to think too carefully about what I was giving up. I said I need time, Robert. How much time? We're trying to help you here, but we can't wait indefinitely. There was an edge to his voice now. The beginning of anger. The mask of concerned son was starting to slip. I'll let you know when I've decided. Mom, he started, then seemed to think better of whatever he was about to say. Fine, but don't take too long. These places fill up fast. And I'd hate for you to miss out on a good opportunity because you waited too long. After I hung up, I realized what was happening. This wasn't about my well-being or my safety. This was about Robert and Melissa's timeline, their plans, their convenience. They had decided I was a problem that needed to be solved, and they were getting impatient with my reluctance to cooperate. They wanted me to disappear quietly, to step aside without a fuss. They wanted to package me up neatly and store me away somewhere I wouldn't be a burden or an embarrassment. They had no idea that the woman they were trying to manipulate had spent 35 years protecting a secret that could destroy everything Robert thought he knew about himself. But I was done protecting him. It was time for Robert to learn who he really was, where he really came from, and what kind of family he was so eager to abandon. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Found Linda's address. When do you want to make contact? I stared at the message for a long time, thinking about the little boy who had asked if I would be his new mommy, and the man who had called me an old hag. I typed back, soon, very soon. I drove to the Parkside trailer court on a gray January morning, my hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. Marcus had given me Linda's address 3 days ago, but I had spent those days working up the courage to actually make the trip. The trailer park was exactly what I had expected. A collection of weathered mobile homes arranged along cracked asphalt roads, with cars in various states of repair parked in front of small patches of brown grass. Children's toys lay scattered in some of the yards. Abandoned bicycles leaned against aluminum siding. Number 47 was a faded blue single-wide with white trim that had seen better days. A small American flag hung from a pole beside the front steps, and wind chimes made of beer bottles tinkled softly in the January breeze. I sat in my car for 5 minutes watching the trailer for signs of life. What was I doing here? What did I hope to accomplish by confronting Robert's biological mother after 35 years? The front door opened, and a woman stepped out to shake a small rug. She was thin, probably in her mid-50s now, with graying brown hair pulled back in a ponytail. She wore jeans and a sweatshirt that said, "World's Best Grandma," in faded letters. This was Linda Lawson. The 19-year-old drug addict who had abandoned my son was now a grandmother. I got out of my car before I could lose my nerve. "Excuse me?" I called as I walked up the short driveway. "Are you Linda Lawson?" She looked up from her rug, squinting at me with curiosity rather than suspicion. "Yeah, that's me. Can I help you?" Up close, I could see the years etched on her face, deep lines around her eyes, the hollow cheeks of someone who had been through too much. But her eyes were clear, alert. Marcus had been right about her being clean. "My name is Eleanor Harrison. I'd like to talk to you about your son." Her face went blank for a moment. Then understanding dawned. Her grip on the rug tightened. "Which son?" she asked carefully. "Robert, the one you gave up for adoption 35 years ago." Linda glanced around the trailer park, as if checking to see who might be listening. Then she motioned toward her front door. "You better come inside." The trailer was small, but surprisingly clean and organized. Crocheted doilies covered a worn sofa, and family photos lined the walls. Children and grandchildren I didn't recognize. The smell of coffee and vanilla candles filled the air. "Sit down," Linda said, gesturing to the sofa. "You want some coffee? That would be nice." She disappeared into the tiny kitchen, and I could hear her moving around, the clink of mugs and spoons. When she returned, she handed me a cup decorated with cartoon cats and settled into a recliner across from me. "So you're Robert's adoptive mother," she said. It wasn't a question. "I am." Linda nodded slowly, studying my face. "He turned out good, didn't he?" I always wondered. The simple question caught me off guard. For 35 years, I had imagined Linda as a monster, a woman who could abandon her child without a second thought. I hadn't expected her to wonder about him, to care what happened to him. "He did very well," I said carefully. "He's married, has 2 children of his own. He works in pharmaceutical sales." Linda's face lit up with something that looked like pride. "Pharmaceutical sales. That sounds important." "It is. He's very successful." "Good," she said, her voice soft. "That's real good. I always hoped—" She trailed off, staring into her coffee cup. "Hoped what?" "Hoped he'd have a better life than I could give him. When they took him away, when I signed those papers, I told myself it was the right thing. But you always wonder, you know? You always wonder if your kid hates you for giving them up." I had come here expecting to find a callous woman who had thrown away her child like garbage. Instead, I found someone who had been haunted by her decision for 35 years. "Why are you here?" Linda asked suddenly, looking at me with those clear, direct eyes. "After all this time, why now?" I set down my coffee cup, choosing my words carefully. "Robert doesn't know he's adopted." Linda's eyes widened. "What? How is that possible?" "I never told him. When I adopted him, the social worker suggested it might be better for him to have a fresh start. So I created a story about his father and me having him naturally." "Jesus," Linda whispered. "He thinks you're his real mother?" "Biological mother, yes." Linda leaned back in her chair, absorbing this information. That's a big secret to keep for 35 years. It got easier over time. He never questioned it, never asked for details that didn't add up. "But something happened," Linda said, reading my expression. "Something made you want to find me." I thought about Christmas dinner, about Robert's cruel words, about the brochures now sitting on my kitchen table. "He's trying to put me in a nursing home," I said quietly. "He wants me to sign over power of attorney, sell my house, disappear into some senior facility where I won't be a burden to his life anymore." Linda's face hardened. "After everything you've done for him?" "He called me an old hag, told me I had already raised him and now I needed to step aside." The words hung in the air between us. Linda stared at me for a long moment, then shook her head slowly. "That ungrateful little shit," she said quietly. The unexpected profanity from this grandmother in her world's best grandma sweatshirt almost made me smile. "I want him to know the truth," I said. "I want him to understand what his life would have been like if I hadn't adopted him." Linda was quiet for a long time, staring out her small window at the trailer park beyond. "You want to hurt him?" she said finally. "I want him to understand what he's throwing away." Same thing. She wasn't wrong. "Tell me about his siblings," I said. "Marcus told me he has half-brothers." Linda's expression grew sad. "Danny and Mike. They're Tommy's boys, too. Born after Robert was taken. Danny's been in prison most of his adult life. Armed robbery, assault, drugs. Mike's not much better. In and out of jail. Can't hold a job. Still using. And you have other children? 3 more. Different fathers. Trying to do better with them. But," she shrugged, "it's hard when you don't have much education, much money. The cycle just keeps repeating itself." I thought about Robert's comfortable suburban home, his children in their private schools, his successful career built on the foundation of love and stability I had provided. He has no idea how lucky he was, I said. No, Linda agreed. He doesn't. But are you sure you want to destroy that luck? Once you tell him the truth, you can't take it back. I thought about the power of attorney documents, about Robert's impatient voice on the phone, about 35 years of unconditional love repaid with contempt. He's already destroyed it, I said. He just doesn't know it yet. Linda reached over and patted my hand. Her fingers were rough, calloused from years of hard work, but her touch was gentle. I understand, she said. I really do. But be careful. Sometimes when you set out to teach someone a lesson, you end up learning one yourself. As I drove home from the trailer park, Linda's words echoed in my mind, but my resolve was stronger than ever. Robert wanted me to step aside, to disappear quietly into the background of his life. Instead, I was going to show him exactly who he really was, where he really came from, and what kind of family he was so eager to abandon. The truth had been my gift to him for 35 years, protecting him from a reality that would have broken him as a child. Now the truth would be my weapon. 2 weeks after my visit to Linda, Robert arrived at my house with a manila envelope and the kind of determined expression I recognized from his childhood when he had made up his mind about something. I need you to sign these today, Mom, he said, settling into my kitchen chair without being invited to sit. I've already put a deposit down on the apartment at Sunset Manor. My blood ran cold. You did what? The apartment became available sooner than expected. It's a good unit, corner location, nice view of the gardens. But they need the paperwork completed by Friday or they'll give it to someone else. Melissa appeared in my doorway, carrying a folder of her own. We've also arranged for a real estate agent to come look at the house next Tuesday. She thinks we can have it on the market within 2 weeks. They had made these decisions without consulting me. My home, my future, my life, all arranged according to their timeline, their convenience. I haven't agreed to any of this, I said quietly. Robert's jaw tightened. Mom, we've been through this. You can't live here alone anymore. It's not safe, it's not practical, and frankly, it's selfish of you to expect us to worry about you constantly. Selfish. The word hit me like a physical blow. Selfish, I repeated. Yes, selfish, Melissa chimed in. Robert lies awake at night, worrying about you falling down those stairs or having a medical emergency with no one around to help. It's affecting his health, his work performance. I looked at my son, this man I had raised from a traumatized 3-year-old into a successful adult, and saw a stranger, someone who could rewrite history to make himself the victim of my stubborn independence. I see, I said calmly. And what if I refuse to sign? Robert and Melissa exchanged one of their silent communications. Then Robert pulled out another set of papers. We've consulted with an attorney, he said. Given your age and some of the incidents we've noticed, we might be able to petition for guardianship if necessary. Incidents? What incidents? You left the stove on last month when we came for dinner, Melissa said. You forgot about our phone call on Tuesday. You seem confused sometimes about dates and appointments. Lies. All of it. But I realized they had been building a case against me, collecting evidence of supposed incompetence that they could use if I refused to cooperate. You're threatening me, I said. We're trying to protect you, Robert replied. From yourself, if necessary. I stared at him for a long moment. This man I had loved unconditionally for 35 years. The little boy who had asked if I would be his new mommy had grown into someone who could look me in the eye and threaten to have me declared incompetent. I need to show you something, I said quietly. I walked to my bedroom and returned with the manila folder I had been keeping in my dresser drawer. Robert and Melissa watched as I spread the documents across my kitchen table, the same table where I had fed him breakfast every morning for 15 years, where I had helped him with homework, where we had carved Halloween pumpkins and decorated Christmas cookies. What is this? Robert asked, leaning forward to look at the papers. Your adoption records. The silence that followed was absolute. Robert's face went through a series of changes, confusion, disbelief, then something like panic as he began to understand what he was looking at. This is a joke, Melissa said, but her voice was uncertain. Robert picked up the official adoption decree, his hands trembling slightly as he read his original name, Robert Michael Lawson. "I don't understand," he whispered. "Your biological parents were drug addicts," I said, my voice steady and calm. "Your mother, Linda, was 19 and addicted to heroin. Your father, Tommy, was a criminal. They abandoned you in a filthy apartment with no food, no clean clothes, no one to take care of you. You were found 3 days later, severely malnourished and dehydrated." Robert's face had gone white. No, this isn't real." "It's very real. I adopted you when you were 3 years old. You were in the system for 8 months before I found you." Melissa grabbed the papers, scanning them frantically. "These could be forged. Anyone can make fake documents." I reached into the folder and pulled out a photograph I had kept all these years. A picture the social worker had taken of Robert on the day I first met him. A thin, frightened little boy with hollow eyes, clutching a worn teddy bear. Robert stared at the photograph as if it were a snake that might bite him. "I never told you because I wanted to protect you," I continued. "I wanted you to grow up feeling loved and wanted, not knowing that your biological parents threw you away like garbage." "Stop," Robert said, his voice barely audible. "Your mother is still alive. She lives in a trailer park about 40 miles from here. She's been clean for 6 years and works at a truck stop diner. Your father died of an overdose 8 years ago." "Stop. You have 2 half-brothers. One is in prison for armed robbery. The other has been in and out of jail for drug possession and theft. That's your real family, Robert. That's where you came from." Robert slammed his hand down on the table, making the papers jump. "Shut up! Just shut up!" But I wasn't finished. 35 years of protecting him, of shielding him from the truth, and he had repaid me by calling me an old hag and threatening to have me declared incompetent. "Do you want to know what Linda said when I told her about your successful career? She was proud that the son she gave up had made something of himself. And do you know what she called you when I told her how you've been treating me?" Robert was breathing hard, his face flushed with anger and shock. "She called you an ungrateful little shit," Melissa gasped. Robert's mouth fell open. "That's what your biological mother thinks of you," I said quietly. "And you know what? She's right." The kitchen fell silent, except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. Robert sat staring at the adoption papers as if they might disappear if he looked at them long enough. Melissa kept glancing between the documents and her husband, her face pale with shock. "Why are you telling me this now?" Robert finally asked, his voice hollow. "Because you wanted me to step aside. You wanted me to disappear quietly into some nursing home so I wouldn't be an inconvenience to your life anymore. You forgot that I'm the only mother you've ever really had." "You lied to me," he whispered. "My entire life is a lie." "I gave you a life," I corrected. "I took a broken, abandoned child and loved him unconditionally for 35 years. I sacrificed my own chances for remarriage, my own dreams, my own future, all to make sure you had everything you needed." Tears were running down Robert's face now, but I felt no sympathy for him. He had made his choice when he called me an old hag. He had made his choice when he threatened me with guardianship proceedings. "I created a family for you out of nothing," I continued. "I gave you traditions, stories, a history that made you feel loved and wanted. And the moment I became inconvenient, you tried to throw me away just like your real parents did." "Don't," Robert said, his voice breaking. "The difference is, your real parents abandoned you because they were selfish drug addicts who couldn't take care of themselves, let alone a child. You're abandoning me because you're a selfish, ungrateful man who got everything he wanted and decided he didn't need the woman who gave it to him anymore." Melissa stood up abruptly, grabbing her purse. "We need to go," she said to Robert. "We need to process this." Robert remained seated, staring at the photograph of himself as a 3-year-old. "Is this really me?" "Yes. I don't remember any of this." "You were traumatized. Children that young often block out painful memories. I made sure you never had to remember." He looked up at me with eyes that seemed much older than they had an hour ago. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to understand what you're throwing away," I said. "I want you to think about that little boy in the picture, alone and scared and hungry. And remember that I'm the one who saved him. I'm the one who made sure he never felt abandoned again. Until now, Robert said quietly. You abandoned me first. He couldn't argue with that, because it was true. After they left, I sat alone in my kitchen, surrounded by the scattered adoption papers. The truth was finally out after 35 years of careful protection. Robert knew who he really was, where he really came from, what his life would have been without me. The question now was what he would do with that knowledge. I gathered the papers and returned them to their folder. The secret that had defined my relationship with my son for over 3 decades was no longer a secret. Now we would see if the truth really could set us both free. 3 weeks passed without a word from Robert. 3 weeks of silence that felt more peaceful than any quiet I had experienced in years. I spent those weeks doing things I hadn't done in decades. I signed up for a watercolor class at the community center. I had lunch with neighbors whose invitations I had declined because I was always waiting for Robert to call, always keeping my schedule open in case he needed something. I started reading again, not the parenting books and child development guides that had filled my shelves for so many years, but novels that transported me to other worlds, biographies of women who had lived boldly despite the obstacles in their way. For the first time in 35 years, I wasn't protecting anyone's feelings or managing anyone's expectations. I was simply living. On a Tuesday morning in February, my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw Robert standing on my front porch, alone. He looked thinner than I remembered, older somehow, as if the weight of the truth had aged him in just 3 weeks. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. Hello, Robert. Mom, he said, then stopped himself. Eleanor. Can we talk? I considered this for a moment. Part of me wanted to close the door, to protect the peace I had found in his absence. But there was something different about him today. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that looked like humility. Come in, I said finally. He followed me to the living room, the same room where he had spread senior living brochures across my coffee table a month ago. Today, he sat on the edge of the sofa as if he wasn't sure he had the right to be comfortable. I've been thinking, he began, then stopped. I've been thinking about everything you told me. I waited. I had spent 35 years making conversations easy for him, filling awkward silences, smoothing over difficult moments. I wasn't going to do that anymore. I went to see her, he said quietly. Linda, my biological mother. This surprised me. How did you find her? I hired a private investigator. Same as you, I imagine. He looked at his hands. She was working at the diner when I got there. I sat in a booth and watched her for about an hour before I worked up the courage to introduce myself. What did you think of her? Robert was quiet for a long time. She's not what I expected. She's tired, weathered, but not mean, not cruel. Just someone who's been through a lot and is trying to do better. I nodded. That matched my impression of Linda. She told me about my half-brothers, about what my life would have been like if I had stayed with her. His voice grew softer. She also told me what you said about me, about being ungrateful. Are you angry about that? No, he said, surprising me. I deserved it. I deserved worse than that. He looked up at me then, and I saw tears in his eyes. She showed me pictures of my brothers, Danny and Mike. They look like me, you know? Same eyes, same nose. I could see myself in them, and it scared me to death. Why? Because that could have been me. Prison, drugs, wasted life. That could have been my story if you hadn't. He stopped, swallowing hard. If you hadn't saved me. The silence stretched between us. Outside, I could hear children playing, the sound of normal family life continuing while we grappled with the wreckage of our own. Linda said something else, Robert continued. She said she gave me up because she loved me, because she knew she couldn't give me what I needed, what I deserved. She said it was the hardest thing she ever did, but it was the right thing. I felt my throat tighten. Linda had never told me that. She said you must have loved me the same way to take in a damaged kid and make him your whole world. She said not many people would do that. You weren't damaged, I said quietly. You were hurt. There's a difference. Robert's face crumpled. I'm so sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry for everything I said, everything I did. You gave me everything, and you threw it away, I finished for him. Yes, I threw it away because I was selfish and stupid and scared. Scared of what? He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Scared of getting old. Scared of watching you decline. Of having to take care of you the way you took care of me. Scared of... He paused. Scared of loving someone that much, and then losing them. The admission hung in the air between us. For the first time, I understood that Robert's cruelty hadn't come from lack of love, but from fear of love, fear of the vulnerability that comes with caring deeply about someone. So you decided to push me away before I could leave you, I said. I guess so. Melissa kept saying it would be easier if you were somewhere with professional care, somewhere we wouldn't have to worry about you. It seemed practical, reasonable, and profitable. Don't forget about the house. Robert flinched. You're right. That was part of it too. We wanted the money. At least he was being honest now. I canceled the apartment at Sunset Manor, he said. And I told the real estate agent we wouldn't be selling the house after all. Good. But I understand if you don't want me in your life anymore. I understand if you can't forgive me. I looked at this man who had been my whole world for 35 years. 3 weeks ago, I had been ready to cut him out of my life forever. But looking at him now, broken and humbled and finally understanding what he had almost lost, I felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. Not forgiveness, exactly. That would take time, if it came at all. But peace with the knowledge that I had done what I needed to do. I had protected myself, established boundaries, and refused to be a victim of his selfishness. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said honestly. You hurt me more deeply than I thought possible. I know, but I don't want you out of my life completely. You're still my son, even if you're not the son I thought I had raised. Robert nodded, accepting this conditional forgiveness for what it was. What do you want now? I asked. I want to earn back your trust. I want to be the son you deserved all along, even if it takes the rest of my life to prove it. And Melissa? His face darkened. Melissa is upset that her retirement plans have been disrupted. She's made it clear that she thinks I'm being manipulated by a vindictive old woman. Is that what you think? No. I think I finally understand what unconditional love looks like and what it costs when you throw it away. We talked for another hour, not about nursing homes or power of attorney or my supposed incompetence, but about what our relationship might look like going forward. Robert would visit, but I would set the terms. He would help with things I actually needed help with, not things Melissa thought I should need help with. Most importantly, there would be no more threats, no more ultimatums, no more attempts to control my life for my own good. As he was leaving, Robert turned back to me one more time. The little boy in that picture, he said, the one you found at the children's home. He would have thanked you every day for the rest of his life if he had understood what you were giving him. He did thank me, I said. Every time he smiled, every time he succeeded, every time he was happy. That was thanks enough. I want to be that grateful again. Then be grateful. But be grateful by living well, by treating people with kindness, by being the man I always believed you could be. After he left, I sat in my quiet house and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Freedom. Not the freedom of abandonment, but the freedom that comes from setting boundaries and refusing to accept less than you deserve. I picked up my phone and called the community center. There was a book club meeting that evening and a volunteer opportunity at the local animal shelter. There was also a senior hiking group that met every Saturday morning. For 35 years, I had defined myself as Robert's mother. Now I had the chance to discover who Eleanor Harrison was when she wasn't protecting, managing, or sacrificing for someone else. I thought about Linda, working at her diner and trying to build a better life for her remaining children. I thought about the strength it must have taken for her to give up Robert, to choose his welfare over her own desire to keep him. I understood now that love isn't just about holding on. Sometimes it's about letting go. Sometimes it's about standing up for yourself when the people you love forget to value what you've given them. The secret I had kept for 35 years was finally out. Robert knew who he was, where he came from, and what I had saved him from. More importantly, I knew who I was. Not just a mother, but a woman who had chosen love over fear, who had built a family from nothing, and who had finally learned to choose herself. The phone rang. It was Robert. I forgot to say something, he said,